I'm sitting in a cramped room above a laundromat in Jomtien, staring at my phone and willing it to ring. It won't, of course. Naaman's number has been disconnected for 3 months now. Her Line account deleted, her Facebook vanished. The woman I sold my house for, the woman I abandoned my daughters for, the woman I believed would be my future, she never existed at all. My name is Robert Calloway. Everyone calls me Bob. I'm 57 years old, and I destroyed my entire life for a 25-year-old Thai woman who played me like a violin for 11 months before disappearing with $620,000 and leaving me with nothing except a rented room and the crushing knowledge that I did this to myself. The afternoon heat is suffocating in this tiny space. No air conditioning, just a small fan that pushes hot air around while I lie on a mattress that smells like mildew and regret. Through the thin walls, I can hear the laundromat machines rumbling below and the sound of Thai families laughing in the street. Normal people living normal lives while I exist in the ruins of every terrible decision I made over the past year. 3 months ago, I stood in the lobby of my bank in Pattaya trying to understand why they had frozen my accounts. The manager, a polite Thai woman who spoke careful English, explained that there had been suspicious activity, large withdrawals, loan applications in my name, transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. She asked if I had authorized these transactions, if I had given anyone access to my banking information. I told her yes, I had given Naaman access. She was my girlfriend. We were starting a business together. She needed the money to open a clothing boutique. Everything was legitimate. The manager looked at me with an expression I've seen too many times since pity mixed with judgment, the look people give to fools who should have known better. She suggested I contact the police because it appeared I had been the victim of fraud. That was the moment I understood. Not suspected, not worried, but truly understood that Naaman had never loved me. The 11 months of daily messages and video calls, the tears when I left Thailand after my first visit, the passionate declarations about our future together, all of it had been performance. She had been systematically robbing me while making me believe I was the luckiest man alive to have found real love at 57. I tried calling her immediately. The number was disconnected. I went to her apartment, the place I had helped her rent, the place where we had spent countless nights together. The landlord told me she had moved out 2 weeks earlier, leaving no forwarding address. The clothing boutique she was supposedly opening, the address she had given me was a vacant lot. My bank account showed the devastating truth. Over 10 months, Naaman had withdrawn or transferred $620,000, everything I had from selling my HVAC business and my house in Phoenix. She had also taken out 3 loans in my name, totaling another $80,000, loans I now legally owed despite never having signed the paperwork myself. I had left my wife, estranged my daughters, sold my home, abandoned my business connections, and moved to Thailand permanently, all for a woman who had been stealing from me the entire time. And the worst part, the truth that keeps me awake most nights, staring at the ceiling in this suffocating room, is that I ignored every warning sign, dismissed every person who tried to tell me I was being scammed because I wanted so desperately to believe that someone like Naaman could actually love someone like me. If you've been enjoying the stories I create, please consider hitting the subscribe button. Your support is crucial for the growth of this channel and helps me dedicate time to making these videos despite my commitment to a full-time job. Thank you for being here. I need to explain who I was before Naaman, because understanding that helps explain how someone like me, successful, practical, not completely stupid, could make decisions so catastrophically bad that they destroyed everything I had built over 35 years. I was born in Phoenix in 1968, grew up in a working-class neighborhood where men worked with their hands and didn't complain about it. My father was a mechanic, and I learned early that if you were good at fixing things, you'd never be unemployed. I went into HVAC heating, ventilation, air conditioning right out of high school, got my contractor's license by 25, and started Calloway Climate Control when I was 28. The business grew steadily. Phoenix summers are brutal, and good HVAC contractors are always in demand. I wasn't getting rich, but I was making solid money enough to buy a house in Glendale, enough to support a family, enough to feel like I had achieved the American dream version available to guys like me. I married Linda when I was 30. She worked as a dental hygienist, practical and sensible in ways that balanced my sometimes impulsive personality. We had 2 daughters, Jessica in 1999 and Emily in 2001. For about 15 years, we had what looked from the outside like a good life. Decent house, reliable income, 2 healthy kids, annual vacations to California beaches, but the marriage was dying slowly from the inside. Linda and I stopped connecting somewhere around year 10. We weren't fighting that might have been healthier. We were just existing in the same house, co-parenting the girls, having the same boring conversations about bills and schedules, sleeping in the same bed without touching. By our 20th anniversary, we were roommates who happened to be legally married. I'm not going to pretend I was a great husband. I worked too much, drank too much, spent too many evenings at the bar with my crew instead of home with my family. Linda was cold and critical, always finding fault with everything I did. We brought out the worst in each other, and by the time the girls were teenagers, they could feel the toxicity even if we tried to hide it. The marriage finally collapsed in 2022. Linda wanted a divorce, and I didn't fight it because I was exhausted from pretending we had something worth saving. The divorce was expensive and bitter. Linda got the house. I had to pay substantial alimony and child support, and the girls sided with their mother in ways that felt like betrayal, even though I understood why. Jessica was 23, and Emily was 21 when we divorced adults technically, but they made it clear they blamed me for the marriage failing. They thought I had been selfish and absent, that I had prioritized work and drinking over family, that Mom deserved better. Maybe they were right. I don't know anymore. After the divorce, I lived alone in a small apartment in Mesa, working 70-hour weeks because there was nothing else to do, drinking most evenings because it was the only thing that made the loneliness tolerable. I was 55 years old, divorced, estranged from my daughters, living paycheck to paycheck despite owning a business because of the alimony and child support payments. By early 2024, I realized I couldn't continue like this indefinitely. I was exhausted physically from decades of crawling through attics in Phoenix heat, exhausted emotionally from the loneliness and the failed marriage, exhausted spiritually from feeling like my life had been a waste of effort that led nowhere meaningful. I decided to sell Calloway Climate Control. A larger HVAC company offered $680,000 for my customer base, equipment, and name. After paying taxes, divorce settlement obligations, and various debts, I'd have about $500,000 enough to retire modestly if I was careful. But retire to what? More years alone in a Mesa apartment, watching my ex-wife move on with her life, while my daughters continued treating me like someone who had failed them. That felt like death in slow motion. A friend named Mike, another contractor who had gone through a similar divorce, told me about Thailand. He had visited Pattaya twice and said it was paradise for American men, beautiful women, low cost of living, and a culture where older Western men were valued rather than dismissed as used up and irrelevant. "Bob, you're killing yourself here," Mike said during a conversation at our usual bar. "You're working yourself to death for alimony payments to a woman who hates you, while your daughters treat you like shit. Why not take your money and go somewhere you'll be appreciated? In Thailand, you could live like a king on a fraction of what you're spending here. And the women, Jesus, Bob, the women actually like older guys. They don't care that you're 55 and losing your hair. You could have a 25-year-old girlfriend easy." I was skeptical about the girlfriend part. It sounded too good to be true, like a fantasy for desperate men. But the idea of living somewhere cheap and warm, somewhere I wasn't constantly reminded of my failures, somewhere I could start over without the weight of my past crushing me, that appealed to me deeply. In March 2024, I decided to take a reconnaissance trip to Thailand before making any permanent decisions. I finalized the sale of Calloway Climate Control, took 2 weeks off, and boarded a plane to Bangkok with plans to explore Pattaya and see if Mike's paradise claims had any basis in reality. When the plane landed at Suvarnabhumi Airport, I felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. I had left behind everything familiar, my business, my city, my language, my culture, to explore whether there was any possibility of building something better in a country I knew nothing about. What I didn't know was that within 48 hours of arriving in Pattaya, I would meet a woman who would make me believe I had finally found what had been missing from my entire life. And that belief would lead me to destroy every remaining connection to my old existence before she disappeared with everything I owned. I spent my first day in Pattaya completely overwhelmed. The city was nothing like Phoenix, hot and humid, in ways that made Arizona heat feel dry and manageable, crowded with tourists and locals on motorcycles, filled with neon signs, advertising bars, and massage parlors. Walking Street, which Mike had told me to visit, felt like sensory overload music blasting from every building. Women in revealing clothes calling out to foreign men, the smell of street food mixing with exhaust fumes. I felt old and out of place. Most of the Western men I saw on Walking Street were either much younger or much older than me, and they all seemed to know what they were doing, while I just wandered around feeling like a tourist who had stumbled into the wrong neighborhood. On my second day, I went to Central Festival Mall to buy some clothes. Thailand's humidity was brutal, and I hadn't packed appropriately. The mall was modern and air-conditioned, filled with Thai teenagers and families shopping. It felt more normal than Walking Street, less aggressively sexual. I was in a shop looking at shirts when a voice behind me said in good English, "That color is too old for you. You should try something brighter, maybe blue or green." I turned to see a young Thai woman, maybe mid-20s, with a beautiful smile and confident manner. She worked at the shop. I could see her name tag said Naaman, but she wasn't being pushy like salespeople usually are. She seemed genuinely interested in helping me look good. "I usually wear darker colors," I said, feeling self-conscious about having a beautiful young woman critique my fashion choices. "Blue seems too bright for someone my age." "That is exactly why you should wear it," Naaman said, laughing. "Dark colors make you look tired. Bright colors make you look alive. Trust me, I work in fashion. I know these things." Something about her confidence and her laugh made me comfortable immediately. We started talking while she helped me pick out several shirts. She asked where I was from, what brought me to Thailand, how long I was staying. Her questions felt curious rather than scripted, and I found myself sharing more than I typically would with a stranger about the divorce, about feeling stuck in Phoenix, about wanting to try something different. "I think it is very brave," Naaman said thoughtfully. "Many people just accept they are unhappy and never try to change. But you came all the way to Thailand to see if there is something better. That takes courage." I was struck by how similar this observation was to thoughts I'd been having about myself. "Most people would say I'm having a midlife crisis," I replied with self-deprecating humor. Naaman shook her head. "Midlife crisis is what people say when they are jealous that someone else has courage to change and they do not. You are not having crisis, you are trying to find happiness. That is completely different." We talked for nearly an hour. The shop wasn't busy, and Naaman seemed genuinely interested in continuing our conversation. She told me about growing up in a small town near Korat, coming to Pattaya at 20 to find work, sending money home to support her family. She spoke about the challenges of working in retail, dealing with rude customers, trying to save enough money to maybe open her own small business someday. When I mentioned that many of the Western men I'd seen in Pattaya seemed to be dating much younger Thai women in obviously transactional relationships, Naaman made a disgusted face. "I hate those women," she said emphatically. "They give all Thai women bad reputation. They pretend to love old men just to get money. It is embarrassing for women like me who actually want real relationship, not transaction." This statement resonated deeply. Naaman was articulating exactly what I had been thinking, that there must be a difference between bar girls seeking financial support and normal Thai women working regular jobs who might be interested in genuine relationships with Western men. As I was preparing to pay for my shirts, Naaman asked if I would like to have coffee sometime. "Not as shop worker and customer," she clarified. "As friends. I enjoyed talking with you, and I think you are an interesting person. Most foreign men who come to Pattaya are boring. They only want to talk about bar girls and how cheap everything is. You are different." I felt flattered and excited. A beautiful 25-year-old woman was asking me for coffee? That hadn't happened in decades, maybe ever. I agreed immediately, and we exchanged phone numbers. That evening, Naaman messaged me online a Thai messaging app she had helped me download. "Thank you for nice conversation today," she wrote. "I hope you are enjoying Thailand. Let me know if you want to have coffee tomorrow." We met the next day at a cafe near the beach. Naaman had finished her shift at the mall and showed up in casual clothes, shorts, and a tank top that showed off her figure in ways I tried not to stare at. We talked for 3 hours, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, genuine connection with another person who seemed to actually enjoy my company. Over the next week, I saw Naaman almost every day. She would finish work and meet me for dinner, or we'd walk along the beach, or she'd take me to local places tourists didn't usually visit. She was affectionate in ways American women hadn't been with me in years, holding my hand, leaning against me, laughing at my jokes even when they weren't particularly funny. One evening, as we sat on the beach watching the sunset, Naaman said quietly, I think I am falling in love with you. I know we just met, and I know you probably think I am too young for you, but I feel something with you I have never felt with anyone else." My heart was pounding. This beautiful young woman was telling me she loved me. It seemed impossible, too good to be true. "Naaman, I'm 55 years old," I said carefully. "You're 25. Why would you want to be with someone my age?" "Because age does not matter to me," Naaman said, looking directly at me. "Thai women care about how man treats them, not how old he is. You are kind and interesting, and you listen to me like I am real person, not just young body. That is what matters." I wanted to believe her so desperately that I dismissed every skeptical thought trying to surface in my mind. She seemed genuine. Her emotions seemed real. And after years of loneliness and failed marriage, the idea that someone could love me, actually love me for who I was, felt like salvation. When my 2-week trip ended and I had to return to Phoenix, Naaman cried at the airport. "I do not want you to go," she said, holding me tightly. "When will you come back?" "Soon," I promised. "I'll come back as soon as I can arrange things." What I didn't understand was that every moment with Naaman had been calculated. Her chance meeting with me at the mall had likely been orchestrated. She or her network probably identified me as a target the moment I entered Pattaya. A middle-aged American man traveling alone who looked lonely and vulnerable. Her instant connection with me, her declarations of love, her tears at the airport, all of it was performance designed to make me emotionally dependent on her before she ever asked for money. The trap had been set perfectly, and I had walked into it eagerly, grateful that someone like Naaman could see something valuable in someone like me. After I returned to Phoenix, Naaman and I messaged constantly. She would send me photos every day, selfies at work, pictures of her meals, images of places in Pattaya she wished we could visit together. We video called nearly every night, and she would tell me how much she missed me, how empty her days felt without me, how she counted the days until I could come back. The time difference was challenging. Thailand was 14 hours ahead of Phoenix, but we made it work. I would wake up early to video chat with her before she went to work, and she would stay up late to talk with me in my evenings. The constant communication made me feel needed and desired in ways I hadn't felt in decades. But there was a problem. My divorce settlement had drained most of my liquid assets. I had $500,000 from selling Calloway climate control, but most of it was invested in retirement accounts that would cost substantial penalties to access early. My immediate accessible cash was only about $120,000 after paying off debts and legal fees. I started planning my return to Thailand, researching visa options and costs of living. Mike had told me that a retired American could live comfortably in Thailand on about $24,000 per year, half of what basic living costs in Phoenix required. If I moved to Thailand permanently, my savings would last much longer, and I could be with Naaman. But there was another complication: my daughters. Jessica and Emily were still angry about the divorce and barely speaking to me. When I mentioned during a brief phone call with Jessica that I was thinking about moving to Thailand permanently, her reaction was explosive. "Are you serious, Dad?" Jessica said, her voice dripping with disgust. "You're going to abandon us completely to move to Thailand and chase some girl young enough to be your daughter? This is pathetic. Mom was right about you. You only think about yourself." I tried to explain that I wasn't abandoning them, that they were adults with their own lives, that I needed to find some happiness after years of being miserable. But Jessica wouldn't listen. "If you move to Thailand, don't expect us to stay in contact," she said coldly. "You'll be making a choice between your family and some woman you barely know. And if you choose her, that tells us everything we need to know about what we mean to you." The conversation left me devastated, but it also made me angry. My daughters treated me like a failure regardless of what I did. Linda had poisoned them against me. They had no interest in understanding my perspective or acknowledging my loneliness. Why should I sacrifice my chance at happiness to maintain relationships with people who didn't even like me? In June 2024, about 2 months after returning from Thailand, I told Naaman during a video call that I wanted to move to Thailand permanently to be with her. Her reaction was joy mixed with tears. "I cannot believe you would do this for me," she said, crying. "Bob, you are the best man I have ever known. I promise I will make you so happy." But there was a complication. Naaman explained that her current living situation was not suitable for both of us. She rented a small studio apartment that was barely big enough for one person. If I was going to move to Thailand, we would need a proper apartment where we could build a life together. "I have been saving money," Naaman said. but apartment deposits in Pattaya are expensive, and I also want to maybe start thinking about business opportunities for our future. I do not want to just work retail forever. I have always dreamed of opening small clothing boutique, nothing big, just small shop selling fashionable clothes for Thai women. This was the first time Naaman had mentioned needing money, and I immediately felt cautious. This was how scams worked, right? Beautiful young woman gets foreigner emotionally attached, then starts asking for money? But Naaman seemed to sense my hesitation. "I am not asking you for money," she said quickly. "I will figure these things out myself. I just wanted to share my dreams with you because you are important to me, and I want you to know what I am thinking about for our future." This disclaimer made me feel guilty for being suspicious. Naaman wasn't asking me for anything, she was just sharing her aspirations. And if I was serious about building a life with her in Thailand, didn't it make sense to help with our living situation and support her business ambitions? "How much would you need for an apartment deposit and to start your business?" I asked. Naaman looked uncomfortable with the question. "Bob, I cannot ask you for money. That is not why I am with you. You're not asking, I'm offering," I said firmly. "If I'm moving to Thailand to be with you, I want us to have a good home. And if you have business dreams, I want to support them. How much would make a real difference?" After some hesitation, Naaman said that $50,000 would cover a security deposit on a nice 2-bedroom apartment and provide seed capital to start her boutique business. It seemed like a reasonable amount, not nothing, but not so large that it would devastate my savings if things didn't work out. In July 2024, I wired $50,000 to Naaman's Thai bank account. She was incredibly grateful, sending me photos of apartments she was looking at and business plans she was developing for the boutique. She also sent me a signed letter promising to repay the money if our relationship ended, though she said she hoped we would never need such a document because we would be together forever. Over the next month, Naaman kept me updated on progress. She had found a perfect apartment in a nice area of Pattaya. She had located a good commercial space for the boutique. She had connected with clothing suppliers. Everything was coming together for our future. What I didn't know was that none of this was real. The apartment Naaman supposedly rented didn't exist. The boutique was fiction. The business suppliers were either made up or were other members of her scam network. The $50,000 had been immediately distributed, some to Naaman, some to her handlers. Some moved offshore, where I would never be able to trace it. But I believed everything, because I desperately wanted it to be true. After decades of failure and loneliness, I had finally found someone who loved me and wanted to build a future together. I wasn't going to let skepticism ruin the first real happiness I'd felt in years. In August 2024, I made the decision that would destroy my life. I decided to sell my house in Phoenix and move to Thailand permanently. The house was the last major asset I had from my marriage. Linda had gotten our family home in Glendale in the divorce, but I had purchased a small 3-bedroom house in Mesa with my share of the settlement. It was modest but comfortable, worth about $400,000 in Phoenix's hot real estate market. Selling the house would give me approximately $350,000 after paying off the mortgage and closing costs. Combined with the $70,000 I still had in accessible savings, I would have $420,000 to fund my new life in Thailand with Naaman. When I told my daughters about my decision, their reactions were exactly what I expected and feared. Jessica called me crying, begging me to reconsider. "Dad, please don't do this," she said, her voice breaking. "You barely know this woman. You're selling everything and moving halfway around the world for someone you've spent maybe 3 weeks with in person. This is insane." I tried to explain that I loved Naaman, that she loved me, that I was miserable in Phoenix and deserved a chance at happiness. Jessica wasn't having it. "You're not thinking clearly," she said. "This woman is obviously using you. Everyone can see it except you. If you do this, if you actually sell your house and move to Thailand, Emily and I are done. We cannot watch you destroy yourself for some scammer. It's too painful." Emily's reaction was colder. When I called to tell her my decision, she just said, "Do whatever you want, Dad. You always have. Just don't expect us to be here to pick up the pieces when it all falls apart, because it will fall apart. We're done enabling your selfishness." These conversations should have made me reconsider. My daughters were essentially disowning me if I moved to Thailand. I was choosing a woman I barely knew over my own children. Any rational person would recognize this as a catastrophic decision. But I was too far gone. I was angry at my daughters for not supporting me, angry at Linda for poisoning them against me, angry at everyone who questioned my relationship with Naaman. They didn't understand what Naaman and I had. They couldn't see that she genuinely loved me. They were jealous that I had found happiness while they remained stuck in their judgmental American lives. In September 2024, I listed my house for sale. The Phoenix market was still strong, and I had an accepted offer within 2 weeks. The closing was scheduled for late October. During this period, Naaman's messages became even more intense. She sent me daily countdowns to when I would arrive in Thailand permanently. She told me she was preparing our apartment to be perfect for me. She shared plans for the boutique grand opening. She made videos telling me how much she loved me and how excited she was to finally build our life together. But there were also increasing requests for money. Naaman needed funds for boutique renovations, $30,000. Then, she needed money to pay import taxes on clothing inventory, $20,000. Then there was an unexpected issue with the apartment lease that required $40,000 to resolve. Each time she asked, I felt a twinge of concern. The amounts were adding up quickly, and I hadn't even moved to Thailand yet. But Naaman always had reasonable explanations, and she always seemed reluctant to ask, making it clear she would find another way if I couldn't help. I feel terrible asking you for money, Naaman said during one video call after requesting the $40,000 for the apartment lease issue. I know it seems like a lot, but these are one-time expenses to set up our life properly. Once you are here and the boutique is running, we will not need anything more. Everything will be self-supporting. I convinced myself she was right. These were startup costs for our new life. Once I was in Thailand, we would live modestly on my savings while the boutique generated income. The investments I was making now would pay off in the long run. Between June and October 2024, I had transferred $140,000 to Naaman for various expenses: apartment, boutique, renovations, inventory, taxes, and permits. Combined with the initial $50,000, I had sent her $190,000 before ever moving to Thailand. My accessible savings were now down to about $70,000, plus the $350,000 I would receive from selling my house. I felt anxious about how quickly the money was disappearing, but Naaman assured me this was the last of the major expenses. Once I arrived, we would live on a budget and let the boutique business grow organically. In late October, my house sale closed. I took the proceeds, $350,000, and deposited them in my bank account, bringing my total liquid assets to $420,000. This was everything I had from 35 years of work. There was no safety net, no backup plan, no family to fall back on if things went wrong. On November 1st, 2024, I boarded a one-way flight to Bangkok. I had sold my house, liquidated my business, cut contact with my daughters, and abandoned my entire life in Phoenix. I was moving to Thailand permanently to be with Naaman and start our new life together. When the plane took off from Phoenix, I felt a mixture of excitement and terror. I had just made the most radical decision of my life, burning every bridge behind me. If this worked, if Naaman and I built something real together, then all the sacrifice would be worth it. But if I was wrong, if my daughters and everyone else who had warned me were right, then I had just destroyed myself completely with no way back. When I landed in Bangkok and transferred to the flight to Pattaya, I felt euphoric despite the exhaustion. I was finally here, finally starting my new life. Naaman was waiting for me at the airport, and when I saw her, all my anxieties disappeared. She ran to me crying, throwing her arms around me, telling me over and over how much she had missed me, and how happy she was that we were finally together. We took a taxi to the apartment Naaman had supposedly rented for us. During the drive, she held my hand and pointed out landmarks, talking excitedly about all the places we would visit together now that I was living here permanently. I felt young again, energized by her enthusiasm and her affection. The apartment was in a decent area of Pattaya, a 2-bedroom unit in a modern building with a pool and gym. It was nicer than I expected, and I felt gratified that the money I had sent had actually been used for something substantial. For the first 2 weeks, life in Thailand felt perfect. Naaman and I spent every day together exploring Pattaya, eating at local restaurants, visiting beaches, just enjoying being together without the distance and time zones that had complicated our relationship for months. She was affectionate and attentive, constantly telling me how happy she was, how much better her life was now that I was here. But there were concerning signs that I rationalized away. The boutique supposedly was not quite ready to open. There were delays with the commercial space, issues with suppliers, complications with business licenses. Every time I asked when I could see the location, Naaman had explanations for why it wasn't a good time. "I want it to be perfect before you see it," she said. "Right now it is still construction and messy. I want you to see it when it is beautiful and ready to open. Please be patient just a few more weeks." In late November, about 3 weeks after I arrived, Naaman told me there was a serious problem. The commercial space she had leased for the boutique had been sold to new owners who wanted to terminate the existing lease and renovate the entire building. She would lose all the money she had invested in renovations unless she could negotiate a buyout or find a new location quickly. "I am so sorry, Bob," Naaman said, crying. "I know you have already invested so much money, but I need another $30,000 to either negotiate with the new owners or secure a different commercial space. Otherwise, everything we have put into the boutique will be lost." I felt sick. Another $30,000? After I had already sent $190,000 before moving here? This was getting out of control. But Naaman seemed genuinely devastated, and the alternative, losing everything we had invested, seemed worse than putting in more money to salvage the situation. I transferred $30,000 from my dwindling savings. Naaman promised this would definitely be the last expense before the boutique opened and started generating revenue. But then came December, and another crisis. Naaman's mother was supposedly very sick and needed expensive medical treatment. The family had no money and no health insurance. Without help, her mother might die. "I know I cannot ask you for more money," Naaman said through tears. "You have already been so generous, but my mother is dying and I do not know what to do. I will find a way somehow, maybe borrow from loan sharks. I just needed to tell you what is happening because you are my partner and I do not want to keep secrets from you." This emotional manipulation was perfectly calibrated. Naaman wasn't directly asking for money. She was sharing a crisis and mentioning she might turn to dangerous loan sharks, making me feel like I needed to rescue her from that situation. And how could I refuse to help save her mother's life after everything Naaman and I had supposedly built together? I transferred $20,000 for the medical emergency. Naaman showed me hospital documents and receipts all in Thai, which I couldn't read, supposedly confirming her mother's treatment. By January 2025, I had sent Naaman $240,000 in total, and I was starting to panic about my financial situation. I was down to about $180,000 in accessible savings, less than half of what I had arrived in Thailand with just 3 months earlier. And the boutique still hadn't opened, and I still hadn't actually seen the commercial space where this business supposedly existed. I told Naaman I needed to see the boutique immediately. I needed to verify that my investments were real, that the business existed as more than just paperwork and promises. Naaman agreed, and we scheduled a visit for the following week. But when that week came, Naaman called saying there had been a break-in at the boutique. The space had been vandalized and inventory stolen. She was devastated and dealing with police reports and insurance claims. It wasn't a good time for me to visit. The excuses were accumulating, and my suspicions were deepening. Something was very wrong, but I couldn't quite bring myself to confront the possibility that I had been systematically defrauded for 11 months. Then, in early February, I woke up one morning to find Naaman gone. She had left the apartment early, which wasn't unusual. She supposedly had business meetings related to the boutique. But when I tried calling her mid-morning, her phone went straight to voicemail. Her line messages weren't delivering. Her Facebook account had been deactivated. Panic overwhelmed me. I went to her listed workplace, the fashion shop at Central Festival where we had first met. The manager told me Naaman hadn't worked there in months. I went to the supposed boutique address. It was a vacant lot. I checked our apartment lease. Naaman had signed it in her name only, and I had no legal right to remain there beyond the month I had already paid for. And then came the final devastating discovery. When I went to my bank to check my accounts, I learned that someone had used my information to apply for 3 personal loans totaling $80,000. The loans had been approved and the money withdrawn, but I had never signed any paperwork or authorized any borrowing. The bank manager explained that it appeared I had been the victim of identity theft and fraud. They were freezing my accounts pending investigation, but the loans were legally in my name and I would be responsible for repaying them even if I could prove someone else had taken out the loans fraudulently. I tried to report everything to the police, but they were not particularly interested. I had voluntarily sent money to my girlfriend. I had given her access to my banking information. The loans in my name would be difficult to prove were fraudulent if I had provided her with the personal information needed to apply. This looks like relationship problem, not criminal matter, the police officer told me with barely concealed contempt. You gave money to Thai girlfriend, now girlfriend is gone. This happens many times. Very difficult to prove fraud when transactions were voluntary. I sat in the police station trying to comprehend what had happened. Over 11 months, Naaman had taken $240,000 in direct transfers, plus another $80,000 in fraudulent loans, for a total of $320,000. I had less than $100,000 remaining from the $420,000 I had brought to Thailand. More devastating than the money was the realization of what I had destroyed to get here. I had sold my house, abandoned my daughters, cut every tie to my old life, all for a woman who had never existed. The loving, grateful, devoted Naaman had been performance from the very first day we met. Every message, every video call, every tearful profession of love had been calculated manipulation designed to extract maximum money before disappearing. After Naaman disappeared, I moved out of the apartment I could no longer afford and found a cheap room above a laundromat in Jomtien. The room cost 6,000 baht per month, about $170, which was all I could afford given that my savings were nearly exhausted and I had no income. The room is tiny, maybe 15 square meters, with a mattress on the floor, a small table, one chair, and a shared bathroom down the hall. There's no air conditioning, just a small fan that barely moves the hot air around. The walls are thin enough that I can hear every conversation in neighboring rooms and every sound from the laundromat below. I tried to find work, but employment options for 57-year-old Americans in Thailand are extremely limited. Teaching English requires certifications I don't have. My HVAC skills are useless here without Thai language abilities and local connections. Most jobs available to foreigners pay wages too low to survive on. Eventually, I found informal work teaching basic English conversation to Thai students who want to improve their language skills for tourism jobs. The work pays about 12,000 baht per month, around $340, barely enough to cover my rent, food, and basic expenses. There's nothing left over for savings or emergencies or any kind of quality of life. I contacted my daughters to tell them what happened. The conversations were brief and painful. Jessica cried and said she wished she could help, but she was struggling financially herself and couldn't afford to send money. Emily's response was colder. We told you this would happen, Dad. We begged you not to do this. Now you want us to feel sorry for you? We don't. You chose that woman over us, and you got exactly what you deserved. My ex-wife Linda heard about my situation through the girls and sent me a brief message. I hope she was worth destroying your life for. You always put yourself first, and now you're finally paying the price. Don't expect any sympathy from us. These messages should hurt, but I'm too emotionally exhausted to feel much of anything anymore. My daughters are right. I chose Naaman over them, ignored all their warnings, destroyed every relationship that mattered for a woman who was stealing from me the entire time. I did this to myself. I joined online support groups for romance scam victims, where I found dozens of other men with similar stories. There was a Canadian who lost $400,000 to a Thai woman who claimed to be starting an export business. An Australian who sent $300,000 to his girlfriend for her family's medical emergencies that never existed. A German who invested 200,000 euros in a restaurant that was never built. The stories are remarkably consistent. Lonely Western men meet beautiful younger Thai women who seem different from bar girls, fall in love quickly, send money for businesses or family emergencies or property investments, then discover everything was fabrication after the women disappear. These are organized networks, another victim told me during an online forum discussion. They identify targets, research their backgrounds, assign the right woman to cultivate the relationship, and systematically extract money until there's nothing left. Then the woman disappears and moves on to the next victim, while the man is left financially destroyed and too ashamed to report it. The investigator I hired using the last of my savings confirmed this. Naaman Fazik was probably not her real name. She was part of a network that specialized in long-term emotional manipulation scams targeting middle-aged Western men. The network had been operating for years, probably stealing millions of dollars from victims across multiple countries. She's likely already in a relationship with a new victim, the investigator told me bluntly. Maybe still in Thailand, maybe moved to Cambodia or Laos, maybe using a completely different identity. These networks are very good at disappearing when scams are completed. You will almost certainly never see her or your money again. I've had to accept several devastating realities. First, I will never recover the $320,000 Naaman stole. Second, I'm legally responsible for the $80,000 in fraudulent loans even though I didn't take them out. Third, I cannot afford to return to America. I don't have money for airfare, I have no house to return to, I have no family who would help me start over. I'm trapped in Thailand, not by choice, but by lack of alternatives. I survive on minimal teaching income in a country where I don't speak the language, don't understand the culture, and will always be seen as just another stupid foreigner who got scammed by a bar girl. The worst part isn't the money or the living conditions. The worst part is knowing that I destroyed my relationships with my daughters for this. Jessica and Emily had warned me, had begged me not to do this, had told me Naaman was obviously using me, but I was so desperate to believe someone could love me that I ignored them, chose Naaman over them, and lost them forever as a result. I can't blame them for refusing to speak to me. I made my choice, and they're living with the consequences of having a father who valued a scammer more than he valued them. I sit in my room above the laundromat most days now, staring at the walls and trying to understand how I went from successful business owner with a paid-off house to 57-year-old man living in poverty in a foreign country with no prospects and no future. The answer, when I'm honest with myself, is that I was vulnerable in ways I didn't recognize. I wasn't just lonely. I was desperate to feel valued, to feel desired, to feel like my life had meaning beyond work and bills and failed relationships. When Naaman appeared and offered me exactly what I needed most, I grabbed onto it without questioning whether it was real. She understood my vulnerabilities better than I understood them myself. She knew I was divorced and estranged from my daughters. She knew I felt like a failure as a husband and father. She knew I was lonely and desperate for connection, and she used all of that to make me dependent on her emotionally before she ever asked for money. By the time the financial request started, I was already so invested in the relationship that I couldn't let myself see the warning signs. Every request came with reasonable explanations. Every excuse for why I couldn't see the boutique seemed plausible. And Naaman was skilled at making me feel guilty for being suspicious, turning my caution into evidence that I didn't trust her and didn't believe in our relationship. The psychological manipulation was more sophisticated than anything I could have defended against. I thought I was too smart, too experienced, too aware of scams to fall for something like this. But Naaman and her network understood that intelligent people are often easier to manipulate because they're confident in their ability to recognize deception, which makes them vulnerable to scams, sophisticated enough to bypass their defenses. I destroyed my life for a woman who never existed. The Naaman I loved, kind, grateful, devoted, ambitious, was complete fiction. The real person behind that performance was a professional criminal who viewed me as nothing more than a source of money to be exploited until I had nothing left. I've thought many times about suicide. Sitting in this suffocating room, facing decades of poverty and loneliness in a country where I'll never belong, death often seems preferable to continuing to exist in the ruins of everything I destroyed. But I'm too much of a coward to actually do it, so I just survive day by day, teaching basic English to Thai students and counting the hours until I can sleep and temporarily escape the awareness of what my life has become. My daughters will never forgive me. Linda will always feel vindicated that I turned out to be exactly as selfish and foolish as she believed. My friends in Phoenix, the few I had, probably think I got what I deserved for chasing a young Thai woman. And they're right. I did get exactly what I deserved. The only thing I can do now is try to warn other men before they make the same mistakes I made. I post in online forums about my experience. I've contacted a journalist who's writing about organized romance fraud in Southeast Asia. I tell my story to anyone who will listen, hoping that maybe, possibly, I can prevent even one other man from destroying his life the way I destroyed mine. Most people don't listen. Just like I didn't listen when my daughters warned me. Just like I dismissed concerns from people who said Naaman was obviously using me. Everyone thinks they're special, that their situation is different, that the woman they've met is genuine, unlike all those other Thai women who scam foreigners. I thought exactly the same thing, and I was completely, catastrophically wrong. My name is Robert Calloway, and I destroyed my family for a woman who never existed. I sold my house, abandoned my daughters, and moved to Thailand permanently for a 25-year-old woman who was stealing from me from the very first day we met. Over 11 months, she took $320,000 and left me with almost nothing. But the money isn't the worst part. Money can be earned again, theoretically. The worst part is that I betrayed my daughters for this. Jessica and Emily had warned me, had begged me to be careful, had tried to protect me from making the biggest mistake of my life, and I chose Naaman over them. They will never forgive me, and they shouldn't. I valued a scammer's lies more than I valued their love and their concerns. I proved to them that I was exactly as selfish and foolish as they believed. No apology can fix that. No amount of regret can undo what I did. I live now in a tiny room above a laundromat in Jomtien, surviving on a few $100s a month from teaching English. I'm 57 years old with no savings, no prospects, no family, no future. I will probably die in this room eventually, alone and forgotten. The final consequence of believing that someone like Naaman could actually love someone like me. If you're reading this story and you're planning to move to Thailand for a relationship with a much younger woman, please consider whether what you have is real or whether you're being manipulated by someone who understands your vulnerabilities better than you understand them yourself. Ask yourself, would this woman be interested in me if I had no money? Would she still want this relationship if I told her I was broke? If the answer is no, or if you're not sure, then what you have isn't love. It's a transaction disguised as love, and eventually you'll pay a price that goes far beyond money. I thought I was different. I thought my relationship was real. I thought I was too smart to be scammed. I was wrong about everything. Naaman is gone. My money is gone. My family is gone. My future is gone. All I have left is this story, and the desperate hope that sharing it might save someone else from destroying themselves the way I destroyed myself. Don't be me. Please, don't be me. If this story has helped you understand how romance fraud destroys lives, please subscribe to this channel. Bob Calloway's experience represents thousands of men who sacrifice everything: family, home, savings for relationships that were never real. These scams succeed because victims are desperate to believe someone loves them, and that desperation makes them vulnerable to sophisticated manipulation. Share this story with anyone considering major life changes for a new relationship. And remember, real love doesn't require you to destroy your family and abandon your life. Thank you for watching, and please protect yourself and those you care about.